Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? Today is Tuesday, September 24, 2024. Coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network in less than an hour. The state of Missouri will execute a black man that is likely innocent. We'll talk about the case of Marcellus Williams. Folks, it is the third week of testimony in the Tyre Nichols federal trial. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump will be here to update us after the prosecution called more than 15 witnesses, including current and former officers and medical personnel involved that night. Vice President Kamala Harris says she supports abolishing the Senate filibuster to pass legislation to, of course, restore federal abortion protections. Plus, we'll tell you about a disturbing story out of Pennsylvania where a Gettysburg College student used a box cutter to write a racial slur on another student's chest. The Democratic Steering and Policy Committee held a hearing on the Project 2025 featuring testimony from those impacted by abortion bans. We'll talk to the executive editor of Yes about their grassroots efforts to combat Project 2025 with Progress 2025. And we'll talk about what's happening in Democratic Party circles when it comes to funding black organizations, black companies, and black-owned media say they're not getting enough, while two other PACs are suggesting that the campaign of Kamala Harris and Democrats should be putting more money on the ground in states to turn out young voters, black voters, and other voters of color. We'll break all of that down. It is time to bring the funk. I'm Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
Folks, in less than an hour, the state of Missouri is going to execute a man that prosecutors say is likely innocent. Just moments ago, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to stop the execution of Marcellus Williams. Marcellus Williams was convicted of murdering a woman, stabbing her 43 times. Yet St. Louis County District Attorney Wesley Bell, he says that he disagrees with the previous prosecutor's role in that case, suggesting that there were issues with the jury, but also when it comes to evidence. And the widow of the person who was killed also said the death penalty should not be used, even though the DA has talked about how this case should be thrown out. The legislature, the state attorney general, the governor of Missouri all said no, they're going to move forward with the execution. As I said, it went forward to the Supreme Court. The three justices who appointed by Democratic presidents, Sotomayor, Kagan, as well as Ketanji Brown Jackson, all voted to stop the execution. This is a statement from the Midwest Innocence Project. Tonight, Missouri will execute an innocent man, Marcellus Khalifa Williams. The victim's family opposes his execution. Jurors who originally, give me 1 second, I'm just want to show you the statement that they actually put forth. Give me 1 second. Jurors who originally sentenced him to death now oppose his execution. The prosecutor's office that convicted and sentenced him to death has now admitted that they were wrong and zealously fought to undo the conviction and save Mr. Williams' life. More than 1 million concerned citizens and faith leaders implored Governor Parson to commute Marcellus' death sentence. Missouri will kill him anyway. That is not justice, and we must all question any system that would allow this to occur. The execution of an innocent person is the most extreme manifestation of Missouri's obsession with finality over truth, justice, humanity at any cost. This is a statement that was released again from the Midwest Innocence Project just moments ago, and it came from Tricia Rojo Bushnell, who is the attorney for Marcellus Williams. In the next hour, we'll be chatting with DA Wesley Bell. Again, the execution is slated to start in less than an hour, and we will talk to Bell. By the time we talk to him, more than likely, Marcellus Williams will be dead. All right, folks, let's talk about the Tyre Nichols case. They are now in the third week of the trial, and U.S. jurors have seen the body get worn footage showing Memphis EMTs not providing any aid to Tyre Nichols. They also heard from former Memphis police officer who pleaded guilty to violating Nichols' civil rights. He gave tearful testimony saying that he wished he had stopped the punches. Joining us right now is civil rights attorney Ben Crump, who represents the Nichols family. Ben, glad to have you here. Just give us a sense, Ben, what it's like being in the courtroom as they have been testifying in this case.
It's very emotional, Roland, and the tragic case you just reported on, Marcellus, is emotional, and it's that type of emotion that reverberates throughout the courtroom. You heard Officer Martin and Officer Mills, who both have pled guilty, come to court. And as you said, Mills was asking for forgiveness from Tyre Nichols' mother, Robin. He said he prays for Tyre's son, because he know how difficult it is for a young black person to grow up without a father. And so it was just heart-wrenching. However, when he could have done something about it, Roland, he didn't do it. Even though he said he didn't punch much or anything, but he could have tried to stop the other offenders from brutally beating Tyre Nichols to death. You heard the former Sergeant Dwayne Smith, who retired shortly after, who was the supervisor of this Scorpion unit. He came to court and said that they all took affirmations and certifications to intervene if an officer was using excessive force, engaged in excessive force. This is a law that they put in place after George Floyd for the city of Memphis. But yet, all of them have swore to do it. They signed to do it. None of them did it. None of them intervened. And so I believe that the jury is paying attention, and we don't ever say anything with certainty, but I believe the jury understands how these officers are responsible, and they are all guilty. Now, the cross-examinations are very aggressive. They are coming after these officers who pled and saying, well, you told the truth. You said you told the truth today, but you also swore that you told the truth when you did the police reports. How can this jury believe that you're not just lying to get a better deal for yourself? And so it's a really aggressive trial with many different dynamics, Roland Martin, many dynamics.
First of all, at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, Tyre Nichols' parents were there. Go to my iPad. There's a photo I took with him. They were there, of course, wearing their buttons. Tyre. They have been going across the country, keeping this alive, keeping this story alive. And have they been in the courtroom every single day?
Every single day. They came to the CBC gala. They left that Friday afternoon after court got out. They have been steadfast in their conviction to make sure there is justice for Tyre Nichols, full justice.
This is, of course, again, emotional. When do you think the prosecutors are going to wrap up their portion, then the defense takes over?
Yeah, we're having a prayer visual outside the courthouse in the morning, Roland, because the state has told the family and our legal team that they plan to rest tomorrow.
Okay. Ben Crump, we certainly appreciate it, man. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Roland, always, brother.
All right, folks, going to go to a break. We come back. We're going to bring our panel in. I'm going to talk about the execution that is moving forward of Marcellus Williams in Missouri. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
Bob and I both voted for Donald Trump.
I voted for him twice. I won't vote for him again. January 6th was a wake-up call for me.
Donald Trump divides people. We've already seen what he has to bring.
He didn't do anything to help us. Kamala Harris, she cares about the American people. I think she's got the wherewithal to make a difference. I've never voted for a Democrat.
Yes, we're both lifelong Republicans.
The choice is very simple.
I'm voting for Kamala.
I am voting for Kamala Harris.
In 2016, Donald Trump said he would choose only the best people to work in his White House. Now those people have a warning for America. Trump is not fit to be president again. Here's his vice president.
Anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. It should come as no surprise that I will not be endorsing Donald Trump this year.
His defense secretary.
Do you think Trump can be trusted with the nation's secrets ever again?
No. I mean, it's just irresponsible action that places our service members at risk, places our nation's security at risk.
His national security advisor.
Donald Trump will cause a lot of damage. The only thing he cares about is Donald Trump.
And the nation's highest-ranking military officer.
We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator. We don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator.
Take it from the people who knew him best. Donald Trump is a danger to our troops and our democracy. We can't let him lead our country again.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
IVF is a miracle for us because it allowed us to have our family. After having my daughter, I wanted more children, but my embryo transfer was canceled 8 days before the procedure. Donald Trump overturning Roe v. Wade stopped us from growing the family that we wanted. I don't want politicians telling me how or when I can have a baby. We need a president that will protect our rights, and that's Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Here's a 78-year-old billionaire who has not stopped whining about his problems.
Oh, she had a big crowd. Oh, the crowd.
This weird obsession with crowd sizes. It just goes on and on and on. America's ready for a new chapter. We are ready for a President Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
The overturning of Roe almost killed me. I had a blood clot in my uterus that caused my labor to have to be induced because of the overturn of Roe v. Wade. I wasn't able to get life-saving treatment sooner. I almost died. And that's because of the decision that Donald Trump made.
I was able to get Roe v. Wade terminated, and I'm proud to have done it.
The doctors and nurses were afraid that if they treated me in the incorrect way, that they would be prosecuted for that. And that's appalling. Donald Trump says that women should be punished.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion? There has to be some form of punishment. For the woman? Yeah.
I believe that women should have reproductive freedom to make the choices about their own bodies. 4 more years of Donald Trump means that women's rights will continue to be taken away one by one by one by one. This has to stop because women are dying.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Farquhar, executive producer, Proud Family. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Folks, my pound, Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, former senior advisor for environmental justice at the EPA, joining us from D.C. Dr. Larry Walker, assistant professor, University of Central Florida, out of Orlando. Derek Jackson, Georgia State Representative, out of Atlanta. Glad to have the three of you here. I'm going to start with you, Derek. This decision out of Missouri. First of all, you have the DA. They said they've been looked at this case. They said that the bottom line is there are some serious issues here when it comes to this case. The county prosecutor. This is the story from the Hill. Wesley Bill, the St. Louis County's current prosecutor, does not stand behind the conviction won by his predecessor, citing concerns Williams' constitutional rights were violated and he may be innocent. Court records show the victim's widower also does not want the death penalty used. Then it says Williams latched on to revelations that the murder weapon was mishandled ahead of the trial. Last month's new test results indicated the knife had DNA on it belonging to 2 people involved in prosecuting the case. A trial attorney has also admitted to repeatedly touching the knife without gloves. Williams' legal team also claimed that attorney recently admitted he struck a potential juror in the case in part because they were black, which would run afoul of Supreme Court precedent. The state says, no, we disagree. The attorney moments later said, no, absolutely not, when asked if the person was struck because of their race, saying that it was because he and Williams both wore glasses and had similar piercing eyes. That's sort of weird.
You know, Roland, that frames up the situation, right? And the reason why I believe they're saying that Marcellus Williams should not be executed this evening is because since 1973, the Death Penalty Information Center has recorded 196. Let me say that again, Roland. 196 exonerations of death row inmates in the United States. And the reason why this 196 were exonerated, because nearly 70% of these cases were involved with misconduct that was done by the police officer or the prosecutor or some other elected official. Nearly 67%, Roland, these cases were exonerated because of perjury or false accusation. And so when you have a case like Marcellus Williams, where the evidence is very clear, as you just articulated, this innocent man should not be killed. It also provides another case, Roland, why we should not have capital punishment in these United States. That's a system that was created many, many, many decades ago. It doesn't work. It continues to fail the system as it relates to criminal justice reform. And so Marcellus Williams should not die this evening.
Larry, on that particular point, it was interesting. Earlier, there was a particular tweet National Review put out, talked about how Vice President Kamala Harris, how she is doing or not doing, faring well with Catholic voters. I thought that was interesting. Of course, they were bringing up the issue of abortion. And I said, it's amazing how these same conservatives don't talk about the Catholic Church, how they are just as opposed to the death penalty as they are abortion. Conservatives always look over that aspect.
Well, you know how politics work, Roland. It's pick and choose elections. Unfortunately, this is essentially we've been dealt with for the last several election cycles. But I think your point is particularly important to those who are insistent they're pro-life, but they're only pro-life when it comes to one single issue. And in less than a half an hour or so, Roland, based on what we see from the DA and other individuals, it's likely that an innocent man is going to be murdered. And I think it's really important for folks to note that my colleague just talked about the disproportionate number of individuals who have been exonerated since 1973. The majority of half of those individuals are Black, and particularly Black men. So we have to highlight and recognize that disproportionality, the issues that all Black folks deal with in various issues, but particularly law enforcement, which we talk a lot about on your show, is that Black people are more likely to be found guilty of the death penalty compared to their white counterparts for similar crimes, and they're more likely to be executed, as we're going to see in less than a half an hour. So what we need not only to recognize this issue, Roland, but we really need to really understanding that this is systemic, and we really need to reimagine what it is when it comes to our criminal justice system, how we deal with people we view in terms of innocence or guilt. And also, Roland, another important issue is, I know the Innocence Project, Legal Defense Fund, among other entities, focus on dealing with various cases. But we need to make sure we have enough money for DNA testing for those individuals who possibly could be innocent, so we're not faced with this issue on another day.
Mustafa, the thing here is, I always say death is death. It is final. There's no coming back from that. And so if you're going to execute someone, you should be 100% sure that the person did it.
Right. There's way too much in relationship to this case, questions that are still unanswered, but yet they're still going to move forward taking this man's life. But you've got to understand who's taking his life, and that's Governor Parsons. He's had, 11 executions since he's been in office, no clemencies, and, he also used to be a sheriff. So he comes from a background of really extreme enforcement sets of actions. And unfortunately, has been shared earlier, by the other brothers who are on the panel, that this is built into the system, all the way back from, when we were freed from being enslaved people. They needed to be able to control us. They needed to be able to set examples to keep people in line. And all the way up until present time, we see that our lives are considered less than valuable. Because it is mind-boggling that if there are still these questions that exist out there, if there is still not enough evidence to be able to move forward on something like this, but yet this governor still finds it, palatable to take this man's life, then that speaks to, the system that we're currently operating in. So, folks, I hope folks will continue to still call, write facts for those who still facts. To ask, for this man to have clemency. But we know, unfortunately, there are a number of other people who will be executed over the next few days as well.
The thing here, Derek, is we have come extremely, extremely close to executing innocent individuals. I'm from Texas, and I'll never forget the case of Clarence Brantley. Clarence Brantley, was within minutes of being executed. And then it was later found out that he did not commit the crime. Books and movies have been done on Clarence Brantley in his particular case as well. And again, when I think about it, you know, he passed away 6 years ago. But when I think about that case, and I think about how he came so close twice to being put to death in Texas because he was convicted of murdering a 16-year-old white girl, and the whole thing was about race. And you sit here and you talk to these people, and when you have a Supreme Court that says, well, you know what, if you exhausted all of your appeals and it was heard, then so be it. That's literally the state of mind.
You know, the sad part, Roland, the story you just shared is an example of many stories. As you well know, our beloved fraternity had to step in. A brother that was over in Oklahoma was on the brink of losing his life. We had to make a lot of phone calls because the same kind of situation. The evidence was very clear that this brother was innocent. But I know we're going to talk about this later on in your show, but the other scary part to this, Roland, that we need to highlight with the audience is how Project 2025 will be able to, if it's fully implemented, give police officers sovereign immunity. That means police officers will have the ability, Roland, right there on the spot to conduct their own form of capital punishment with sovereign immunity. A police officer with that kind of power where they will be absolved from criminal and civil punishment. I mean, so already we're looking at a system, Roland, where only 2% of the officers are convicted. That means the other 98% are not convicted. And so this issue today surrounds Marcellus Williams, but if we're not careful, it can get worse before it become worse.
You know, Larry, for the people who are saying, hey, I might be sitting this out, especially, or I might look at voting for Donald Trump, especially black men, let me say this to every single black man who is watching or who is listening. The 6 Supreme Court justices named by Republicans, including Clarence Thomas, who's black, all voted to allow the execution of Marcellus Williams. Let me say it again. The six conservative Supreme Court justices named by Republicans all voted to let Marcellus Williams die tonight. The 3 justices named by Democratic presidents, they voted to stop his execution. Every black man who's considering voting for Trump, or who is choosing to sit the election out, or who is saying, hey, I can't vote for a woman, understand this could be you. Mm-hmm. It could be your daddy, it could be your brother, it could be your uncle, it could be your cousin, it could be your neighbor, it could be your homeboy, it could be your fraternity brother, it could be your church member. This is real. And when you look at all of these cases where black men have been put in prison for things they did not do, put on death row for crimes they did not commit, they too came close to death. So do understand, the next president could very well appoint 1 or 2 Supreme Court justices. So black men, you must ask yourself the question, do you want to see Donald Trump back in the Oval Office, appointing hardcore, right-wing, likely white Supreme Court justices who will allow innocent people to be killed via execution? Or will you vote for Vice President Kamala Harris, who will appoint Supreme Court justices, who will have a different interpretation, understanding of cases like this and the death penalty? Larry, that really is, at the end of the day, out of all other stuff, that really is a fundamental question folks have to ask or answer for themselves.
Roland, I'm glad you provided context. This is not a game. And, as black men on this panel talking about, as you highlighted, Donald Trump has made a very clear promise about what he will do if he becomes president of the United States. When my colleague talked about immunity for police officers and brothers out there who, like you said, who are, I guess, on the fence. The idea that, law enforcement officers can get away with, whatever it is, crimes, like as my colleague said, being jury and executioner on the spot, or other situations where we had officers' behaviors and evidence and those other challenges we know black folks have dealt with for generations. We cannot afford to find ourselves in a situation where we're talking about, essentially Jim Crow when it comes to how black folks are treated as related to law enforcement, among all the other issues you talk about on this show. But I've been certainly talking to black men, and look, I'm a father, I have a son, I have nephews. And this issue this election is so important that brothers out there have to get out the vote. You need to bring somebody along with you. You need to donate, because if you allow Trump to get in office in November, we're facing some serious challenges that we may not be able to overcome for generations.
Mustafa.
The dead cannot cry out for justice. Only the living can do that. So we have the responsibility and the opportunity to not only protect those who are still with us who are facing these injustices, but we also have the ability to make sure that those whose lives have been taken prematurely, that they receive some form of justice by us getting engaged and making change in the system.
All right, folks, going to go to a break. We come back, more on Roland Martin Unfiltered. We'll talk about Georgia Teamsters endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris. That's a huge development as the national organization chooses not to endorse. Also, Vice President Harris reaffirms her position to get rid of the filibuster to pass a bill codifying abortion rights. We'll talk about that as well. Folks, don't forget to support us here at Roland Martin Unfiltered and the Black Star Network. Your support is crucial because we're out there fighting a good fight when it comes to advertising money. It is not easy for black-owned media. Don't forget also, Cash App is still lots of drama. They're limiting transactions daily, weekly, and in fact, we can't even use Cash App for the show because we're an S Corp, not an LLC. So we're trying to work through that. So if you want to support this show, there are 3 ways to give. First of all, 4 ways. You can send your check and money order. P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle, Roland at RolandSMartin.com. Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. We'll be right back.
Bob and I both voted for Donald Trump.
I voted for him twice. I won't vote for him again. January 6th was a wake-up call for me.
Donald Trump divides people. We've already seen what he has to bring.
He didn't do anything to help us. Kamala Harris, she cares about the American people. I think she's got the wherewithal to make a difference. I've never voted for a Democrat.
Yes, we're both lifelong Republicans.
The choice is very simple.
I'm voting for Kamala.
I am voting for Kamala Harris.
In 2016, Donald Trump said he would choose only the best people to work in his White House. Now those people have a warning for America. Trump is not fit to be president again. Here's his vice president.
Anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. It should come as no surprise that I will not be endorsing Donald Trump this year.
His defense secretary.
Do you think Trump can be trusted with the nation's secrets ever again?
No. I mean, it's just irresponsible action that places our service members at risk, places our nation's security at risk.
His national security advisor.
Donald Trump will cause a lot of damage. The only thing he cares about is Donald Trump.
And the nation's highest-ranking military officer.
We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator. And we don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator.
Take it from the people who knew him best. Donald Trump is a danger to our troops and our democracy. We can't let him lead our country again.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
IF is a miracle for us because it allowed us to have our family. After having my daughter, I wanted more children, but my embryo transfer was canceled 8 days before the procedure. Donald Trump overturning Roe v. Wade stopped us from growing the family that we wanted. I don't want politicians telling me how or when I can have a baby. We need a president that will protect our rights, and that's Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Here's a 78-year-old billionaire who has not stopped whining about his problems.
Oh, she had a big crowd. Oh, the crowd.
This weird obsession with crowd sizes. It just goes on and on and on. America's ready for a new chapter. We are ready for a President Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
The overturning of Roe almost killed me. I had a blood clot in my uterus that caused my labor to have to be induced because of the overturn of Roe v. Wade. I wasn't able to get life-saving treatment sooner. I almost died. And that's because of the decision that Donald Trump made.
I was able to get Roe v. Wade terminated, and I'm proud to have done it.
The doctors and nurses were afraid that if they treated me in the incorrect way, that they would be prosecuted for that. And that's appalling. Donald Trump says that women should be punished.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion? There has to be some form of punishment for the woman. Yeah.
I believe that women should have reproductive freedom to make the choices about their own bodies. 4 more years of Donald Trump means that women's rights will continue to be taken away one by one by one by one. This has to stop because women are dying.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Me, Sherry Shepard, and you know what you're watching, Roland Martin, Unfiltered.
All right, folks. Today, Vice President Kamala Harris, in a radio interview in Wisconsin, vows to get rid of the Senate's filibuster rule to pass a bill codifying abortion rights. Well, first of all, if she's elected president, she can't get rid of that. The Senate would have to do that. But in an interview with Wisconsin Public Radio, she explained how she plans to get a bill to restore Roe v. Wade through Congress, given that Republicans are likely to weaponize the Senate filibuster.
To hold on to the majority in the Senate and take back the House. And so I would also emphasize that while the presidential election is extremely important and dispositive of where we go moving forward, it also is about what we need to do to hold on to the Senate and win seats in the House. That being said, I've been very clear. I think we should eliminate the filibuster for Roe, and we need and get us to the point where 51 votes would be what we need to actually put back in law the protections for reproductive freedom and for the ability of every person and every woman to make decisions about their own body and not have their government tell them what to do.
And like clockwork, two individuals who were Democrats now claiming to be independent. They took exception to her comments. Go to my iPad. Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who's retiring. He was upset. He's a staunch defender of the filibuster. He goes, shame on her. It's the only thing. She knows the filibuster is the holy grail of democracy. It's the only thing that keeps us talking and working together. If she gets rid of that, then this would be the House on steroids. Then he also said that he wouldn't, because of this decision, he would not back her for president. That ain't gonna happen. Dude, whatever. Whatever. Joe Manchin, we don't give a shit. Okay, we don't. So you could just sit here and whine and complain. But the bottom line is, we know damn well what has been stopped consistently as a result of this. And then, of course, you got the idiot Kyrsten Sinema, who's not running in Arizona because she knew she was going to lose. She said this: to state the supremely obvious, eliminating the filibuster to codify Roe v. Wade also enables a future Congress to ban all abortion nationwide. What an absolute terrible, short-sighted idea. Look, Mustafa, I understand the position that folks have in terms of the filibuster, but let's be real clear. Okay, they change the filibuster when they want to. Mm-hmm. So there's no hard and fast rule against the filibuster. They change it when it comes to passing continuing resolutions. They change it for other reasons. So it's not like the filibuster is always in place.
Right. Well, they're counting on the majority of Americans to not actually know what goes on Capitol Hill and what the processes are and how, as you stated, people make changes when they feel that it's a priority and something that they want to get done. The filibuster has also been used to water down a lot of important pieces of legislation, you know, where people are like, well, if we don't do X, then we're not going to be able to move forward. So, you know, the vice president, she knows what she's doing. She's worked in the Senate before. She knows how difficult it will be, but also how important it is to make sure that we're actually moving forward on pieces of legislation that the American people want and need. So I'm all for majority rules. So that means if you've got the 51, then that's good enough because that's the majority.
What's also crazy here, Derek, is that the filibuster is not constitutional, meaning it's not in the Constitution. It's a Senate rule. That's all it is. It's a rule. So this idea that the filibuster is just so the holy grail, no, it's not.
You know, Roland, as you well know, we change rules every legislative year. I'm in the House, but our rules are different than the Senate. But you're exactly right. The filibuster or the nuclear option, these types of things are simply rules. The bottom line, if she's already signaling to the public at large, Roland, that she needs a trifecta. One, she's trying to tell everybody, start at the top of the ticket, go all the way down, because in order for me to do some of the things that I'm out here promising, I need a Senate that's Democratic. I need a House that has a brother by the name Hakeem Jeffries as the Speaker of the House, and of course the White House. When you got that trifecta, as you well know, Roland, also that a lot of these things that she's going to need, she made, and she's skilled, right? She was in the Senate, so she knows the rules. But a lot of these things she's promising, from the George Floyd Act to the John Lewis Voting Rights Act to the Freedom Act to Roe v. Wade. All these bills may need a 51 vote in the Senate, obviously the majority in the House, and it ends up on her desk, the resolute desk. She's going to sign into law. And so it's great to hear a Democrat saying, this is what I'm going to do, because what Mitch McConnell did to stop President Barack Obama, right? They change these rules all the time to make it convenient to make their needs met. And so she's just saying, I see you, I raise you, and I'm going to do the same thing if the American public make me president.
Larry?
I need, Senator Schumer, since we're talking about the removing the filibuster, to get on board. Because listen, Roland, let's keep it 100. What the filibuster is doing, and my colleague highlighted two critically important bills as it relates to the Black community. What it's essentially doing is denying a multiracial, ethnic, population, America, the opportunity to live and be free. And that's the bottom line. And so I'm glad the VP and hopefully future president acknowledge that the filibuster needs to be changed. But we need some of the Democrats, old school Democrats, to realize that you cannot continue to ask people to vote for you and then turn around and not use the power to once again make sure those that increasingly, racial and ethnic groups and religious groups who are continually growing in our society have the rights they need to, like I said, walk the streets, and also women's body autonomy, some of these other issues that the VP talked about today. So it's time for some of those old guard Democrats to get on board.
Indeed, folks. Also today, the Georgia Teamsters came out in support of Vice President Kamala Harris. They released now keep in mind, after releasing their statement, we now have multiple states, battleground states, where the Teamsters in those states are endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris. Of course, the International Teamsters Union chose not to release their particular statement, their endorsement. But what we've seen in Pennsylvania, we've seen in Nevada, we've seen in multiple places across the country where they have California as well. So this is Teamsters Joint Council number 75. Okay, and so actually go to my let's do this. I'm gonna go to my iPad. I'll pull it up because I want to zoom in on some of this here so y'all can actually see it at home. And so you see all of the affiliates they actually support. So once we it says the Executive Board of Teamsters Joint Council 75 is proud to announce our endorsement of the Kamala Harris and Tim Walz ticket for President and Vice President of the United States. Joint Council 75 represents 10 local unions across Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. The candidate's strong track record on workers' rights and advocacy stands in clear contrast to that of the Republican nominee, Donald Trump. As the election draws near, we believe it is important to share our perspective on which candidate truly stands up for all workers, especially union members. The record is clear. Whether it's backing funding for union members and retiree pensions, ensuring a strong pro-worker, pro-union National Labor Board, or supporting the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, the Harris-Walz ticket is the best choice for organized labor. This right here, Derek, it shows you, again, you got these white union members who love themselves from Donald Trump, but people supporting him want to get rid of the National Labor Board. They do not support union workers, and they were not backing. Not a single Republican voted to protect their pensions. And so it's amazing how these folks on the international level, literally are looking at going against their own economic interest.
Not only do they vote against their own economic interests, Roland, they're breaking their own, voting streak, right? I mean, the Teamsters always endorse a Democratic candidate. And so the local Teamsters said, well, although the international Teamsters will not endorse her, the 1.5 million active and retired members saying we're going to get behind her because this party is always pro-working families and the ones who saved our pensions. The record is very clear what this is all about. And to your point, Roland, these individuals who are on the top, who elected not to endorse her, they're sending a signal to Trump. But the local Teamsters are very clear saying, no, we're not buying what you're selling, and the 1.5 million of us are following Vice President Kamala Harris.
This is obviously important, Mustafa, because they can put boots on the ground. They can do door knocking, phone banking, and put their resources in these critical states. So the hell with the international endorsement, having these Teamsters in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Nevada, Michigan, endorse her, that's really the key.
Oh, it most definitely is. I'm third generation union, and I understand, the power that exists there, being able to have those local connections. People respect, the individuals who are part of the unions, and they know that not only are they looking out for their families, but they're looking out for the communities where they come from. So having those endorsements carry a lot of weight. They carry more weight than when we see some of these celebrities saying stuff. People actually honor the individuals who they see getting up every morning, going to work, working a double, and then coming back home and still finding time to give back to their community. So I think it's incredibly important.
Larry.
Listen, Roland, I'm from Philadelphia, a blue-collar, pro-union city in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So I'm glad that the unions in these battleground states have come out in support of VP Harris. We have to remember, my colleague talked about, what Democrats have done in terms of pensions. She broke that tying vote in the U.S. Senate and holds the record for, the number of tie-breaking votes in the Senate. So it's not just a matter of talk, it's a matter of policies. And so if it wasn't for VP Harris and President Biden, tens of thousands of union workers will have lost their pensions. So we have to, like I said, it's really about not rhetoric, it's about policies. And so those folks, in terms of the top of the Teamsters union, there's a failure of leadership because once again, it's about what is going to impact putting food on the table. And so for those Teamsters out there that continue to vote against their own interests, you don't want to mess around and find out in November.
You do not, folks. Let's talk about Pennsylvania, where a student at Gettysburg College in southern Pennsylvania has left the school over a campus investigation where it found that the student responsible for etching a racial slur across another student's chest during a social gathering earlier this month. Over the past few weeks, the small liberal arts college of some 2,200 students made national headlines after the school announced it was investigating a report of a hate crime. According to the school's website, 62% of the students are white, while 20% are non-international students of color. The incident took place on September 6th during an informal men's swim team gathering at an on-campus residence. The victim's family issued a statement to the Gettysburgian, the school newspaper, detailing what took place, saying that their son became the victim of a hate crime. It took place, as we said, at a gathering. It was important to note that he was the only person of color at this gathering. The reprehensible act was committed by a fellow student athlete, someone he considered his friend, someone who he trusted. This student used a box cutter to etch the N-word across his chest. In less than 48 hours after the incident, our son was interviewed by the members of the coaching staff and summarily dismissed, not suspended, from the swim team. The punitive action was taken prior to the commencement of the Office of Students' Rights and Responsibilities on investigation. That's pretty wild there, Larry. You're a college professor. You would think that, how are you dismissing the person who had the N-word etched in their chest with a box cutter? And then what I'm trying to understand is, how did that even happen? Was he being held down against his will by the other members of the swim team?
This is a wild story, Roland. And you said, I'm a professor in higher education. This is an absolute failure of leadership at the president of Gettysburg College, also the coaches. How does a student get suspended before this even went to, this was under, the university had the opportunity to investigate this issue. The other thing is, Roland, that this is not, sometimes when, white kids commit these crimes, they kind of brush it off. He used a box cutter. And it was also clear, Roland, in terms of the failure of leadership, that they did once, even though it was an investigation, they should have contacted law enforcement, which they did not. This is a criminal case. This is a hate crime. It should be prosecuted by the local DA. And that student, not only in terms of being reinstated, obviously, the swim team, but I hope, and I read the statement from the family, they should sue the university because the president and all the coaches, they all failed this, and also his classmates and his teammates, they absolutely failed him. And as the details of how this exactly went down, as you described, comes out, we really need to make sure those individuals responsible, that their names are front and center on TV.
Well, it was interesting here. The school announced that the individual who carved the N-word in the chest of the teammates is no longer enrolled. Okay, was he sent home? Did he choose himself to pull out, or did they actually leave that? This is the statement right here. Quote, we can report that the individual who scratched a slur onto another person is no longer enrolled at the college. Of course, that's what the school actually said. The president decried the racist incident in letter to the campus community. But again, you have this sort of back and forth. The family talked about the lack of due process. They've also reached out to NAACP organizations and the Pennsylvania Commission on Human Relations. What do you make of this, Mustafa?
Well, Larry covered a lot of it. We got to put this in perspective, right? So Republicans continue to talk about crime and violent crime, and we know that has gone down. But when it comes to hate crimes, which have been going up and up and up, they have a difficult time in actually being able to speak about that. Now, when they put that press release out, it was interesting that they said it was a scratch because, as Larry shared just a second ago, a box cutter is a razor blade. And you're not just going to have a scratch. So folks are continuing to try and water this down, probably because they did not take their own set of responsibility and quickly addressing it. And then, of course, you have to ask the question also, why wasn't the local police also involved in this assault that took place? And yes, it is a hate crime, so there's also the federal aspect to it. So it's going to be interesting to see now that the spotlight has been put on this, how they proceed. And bringing forward this young man and the others who evidently watched this happen.
Derek?
This is another clear example of injustice, especially when someone of color is the victim. I was Googling this story earlier, Roland, and some of them were saying that, well, maybe this was hazing. No, there's a difference between hazing and a hate crime. The law is very clear. Someone should be held accountable. Someone should be liable, Gettysburg specifically. And when you think about, and I had the same question as well, Roland, was the student expelled? See, because that's different than just simply leaving the college. right? And so it's just interesting. We just got to follow this case all the way through and make sure the young man gets justice.
Indeed, indeed. All right, folks, hold tight 1 second. We come back. We're going to talk about a discussion about Project 225 today on Capitol Hill. Also, in a few moments, Missouri is going to put to death Marcellus Williams, a man who has claimed his innocence and who the prosecutor there says his case should be thrown out because of issues with constitutional rights. We'll talk to that DA in about 30 minutes. We'll also talk in this hour about the lack of support that black vendors and black-owned media is getting from Democratic campaigns. There's a lot of concern about Vice President Kamala Harris, but we try to show you these other PACs who I've reached out to, and they've been real quiet about their black-owned media spend. Yep, we're going to show you, and we're going to name them. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
He told us who he was.
Should abortion be punished? There has to be some form of punishment.
Then he showed us.
For 54 years, they were trying to get Roe v. Wade terminated, and I did it, and I'm proud to have done it.
Now Donald Trump wants to go further with plans to restrict birth control, ban abortion nationwide, even monitor women's pregnancies. We know who Donald Trump is. He'll take control. We'll pay the price.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Bob and I both voted for Donald Trump.
I voted for him twice. I won't vote for him again. January 6th was a wake-up call for me.
Donald Trump divides people. We've already seen what he has to bring.
He didn't do anything to help us. Kamala Harris, she cares about the American people. I think she's got the wherewithal to make a difference. I've never voted for a Democrat.
Yes, we're both lifelong Republicans.
The choice is very simple.
I'm voting for Kamala.
I am voting for Kamala Harris.
In 2016, Donald Trump said he would choose only the best people to work in his White House. Now those people have a warning for America. Trump is not fit to be president again. Here's his vice president.
Anyone who puts himself over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. It should come as no surprise that I will not be endorsing Donald Trump this year.
His defense secretary.
Do you think Trump can be trusted with the nation's secrets ever again?
No. I mean, it's just irresponsible action that places our service members at risk, places our nation's security at risk.
His national security advisor.
Donald Trump will cause a lot of damage. The only thing he cares about is Donald Trump.
And the nation's highest-ranking military officer.
We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator. And we don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator.
Take it from the people who knew him best. Donald Trump is a danger to our troops and our democracy. We can't let him lead our country again.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
IVF is a miracle for us because it allowed us to have our family. After having my daughter, I wanted more children, but my embryo transfer was canceled 8 days before the procedure. Donald Trump overturning Roe v. Wade stopped us from growing the family that we wanted. I don't want politicians telling me how or when I can have a baby. We need a president that will protect our rights, and that's Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Here's a 78-year-old billionaire who has not stopped whining about his problems.
Oh, she had a big crowd. Oh, the crowd.
This weird obsession with crowd sizes. It just goes on and on and on. America's ready for a new chapter. We are ready for a President Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
The overturning of Roe almost killed me. I had a blood clot in my uterus that caused my labor to have to be induced because of the overturn of Roe v. Wade. I wasn't able to get life-saving treatment sooner. I almost died. And that's because of the decision that Donald Trump made.
I was able to get Roe v. Wade terminated, and I'm proud to have done it.
The doctors and nurses were afraid that if they treated me in the incorrect way, that they would be prosecuted for that. And that's appalling. Donald Trump says that women should be punished.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion? There has to be some form of punishment for the woman. Yeah.
I believe that women should have reproductive freedom to make the choices about their own bodies. 4 more years of Donald Trump means that women's rights will continue to be taken away one by one by one by one. This has to stop because women are dying.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Hey, it's John Murray, the executive producer of the new Sherry Shepherd Talk Show. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Today, Democratic leaders and the Democratic Steering and Policy Committee held a hearing on Trump's Project 2025. The hearing featured testimony from everyday Americans who know firsthand how Trump's Project 2025 has or will hurt them and their families. The purpose of today's hearing was to explore the impact of proposals to criminalize abortion nationwide, hurt the middle class, and end Social Security and Medicare as we know it. Here's some of the testimony.
Movement will do. I have been an ultrasound tech for the past 20 years, sharing some of the most vulnerable, joyful, and also harrowing moments of people's lives. I have worked in multiple hospitals, OBGYN offices, and private practice. It wasn't until I started working in an abortion clinic that I truly found my community. I wake up every day loving what I do, knowing I make a difference each and every day for the people to whom I give care. I am grateful and blessed to help the folks that come into my ultrasound room. I am a person of faith, and my faith teaches me to love. I pray every day that I can be a light for every person that comes into my office. I hope that at the end of my day, someone will be encouraged by the words I speak to them, and that they will feel some joy radiating off of me, especially as they face choices that can feel too big for them to carry on their own. I have worn many hats for my patients, serving as a friend, a sister, a parent, and spiritual advisor to them. I have held their hands and been a shoulder to cry on as they receive devastating and life-changing news. But after the fall of Roe, I have been forced to add organizer and fundraiser to that list, as women have been forced to flee Georgia to receive health care they need. In the time before the rights of Roe were taken away, Amber Nicole Thurman and Candy Miller are women that could have been my patients. But because of Georgia's abortion ban, they were forced to try to seek care on their own. Candy shouldn't have been faced with the thought of being prosecuted while making the decision that was best for her and her family, a choice that would allow her to be a mother to her children. Amber's death hit me hard as she was a part of my community, a community that I've called home for 22 years. She died in a hospital where I've worked and a place where I watched my grandson be born. If these bans hadn't been put in place, I might have been the person to perform Amber or Candy's ultrasound. I might have been able to make them smile and give them a hug or listen to them say thank you.
Now, we know Project 2025's intent is to reshape the federal government and decimate civil and human rights. Yvette Dion, Executive Director of Yes Media, she joins us right now to talk about Progress 2025. Yvette, so exactly what is Progress 2025?
So Progress 2025 is an initiative by Yes Media to really offer a counter offer to Project 2025. So often when we're thinking about Project 2025 and the way that it would decimate the United States and the federal government and just everyday ordinary Americans, we think about the fear of that and the hopelessness of that. Progress 2025 offers a radical vision for what our world could look like if it wasn't just stopping Project 2025, but going further than that, really allowing us to connect with one another, provide resources to the most needy among us, and to really ensure that together and collectively we can create the world that we desire to live in.
Okay, so what is it? So what does it contain?
So it's a hub of ideas, of stories, particularly reported stories, that focus on 10 key areas. So we have immigration, we have reproductive health, reproductive justice, we have civil liberties, economics, racial justice, policing. So essentially organizers and activists who are on the ground reporting about what their communities are doing to create solutions that can be implemented across the United States.
Okay. So if folks want to actually see what Progress 2025 is, where do they go?
They can go to progress2025.org, which would redirect them to yesmagazine.org, where they can read this wealth of stories about what we're hoping these solutions can be to Project 2025.
Mustafa?
Well, thank you for everything that you're doing. Can you talk about some of the folks who have been a part of the design of Project 2025 and some of the, examples of how real change can happen?
Absolutely. So as we know, Project 2025 is funded by the Heritage Foundation, and essentially they're creating an entire vision of what the United States would look like. So we know what that would look like for Black folks. We know what that would look like for queer folks. We know what that would look like for low-income folks. And so a lot of this is not just stopping at the floor. So when we think about particularly reproductive justice, so often what abortion or pro-choice organizers are saying is that restoring Roe v. Wade is the floor. What would it look like to ensure, for instance, that we overturn the Hyde Amendment so that people who are low income can access the reproductive health care that they need? What would it look like to remove police officers from schools? What would it look like to implement what Minnesota has done to allow every student to eat for free? What would it look like to take that and make that national, and then also ensure that students are fed breakfast, lunch, and dinner? And so there are a number of organizations and activists who are already doing this on a local level. And so the question is, how do you take that and nationalize it? What would that look like to do that on a national scale? So that's what Progress 2025 aims to do.
Larry?
Yes, thank you for all your work. I'm curious in terms of, you talked about kind of working with a lot of grassroots organizations. Can you talk about the kind of reach you've had so far? Have you worked college campuses, HBCUs, Hispanic serving institutions, et cetera? And, are you have you connected with folks in each state? So can you kind of unpack that a little bit?
Of course. So I'm an HBCU alum, a proud HBCU alum. And so that's a large part of the work that we are doing, is that we know that to roll back Project 2025, it's really going to require Gen Z. It's really going to require millennials and people who are in these institutions, who are on the ground, who can register people to vote. And so a large part of our effort is coordinating with HBCUs and voter organizations, so voter registration organizations, to get people activated around this issue. I think right now it feels very theoretical, which is the reason why this hearing today was so essential, to see how people are already being impacted by some of these proposed policies. And so we want to work with HBCUs. We want to work with people who are registering voters and really get them activated around rolling this back and preventing it from becoming law.
Derek?
So I understand your aim and objective for Progress 2025, but my concern would be, how are you going to differentiate Progress 2025 from Project 2025, especially in this age of misinformation and disinformation? We know that the Heritage Foundation and the Trump campaign has tried to move away from Project 2025. They try to call it something else, Agenda 47, Project 47, all this other kind of stuff. Is there a risk or concern when now you're going to add Progress 2025 into this space?
I think there's a risk. Of course, there is a risk. I think the Trump administration is trying their very best to separate themselves from Project 2025. Conservatives in general are pretending as if they have no idea how this came to be and how it exists. And I think the risk there is really overwhelming the discourse around Project 2025. But I think if we're able to connect this idea that it's not just about rolling back Project 2025, like we know that abortion bans already exist. They are already harming people in multiple states across the United States. It's not just enough to implement Roe v. Wade again. We have to go further. And so if we create this and think of this as a vision of where we can go, where leftists can go, where Democrats can go, I think it allows us to tie ourselves to Project 2025, but also push people further than they are thinking about it right now. So for instance, often we're thinking about, okay, what happens if we are able to preserve Social Security? But what would happen if we say lowered the voting age? What would happen if we made Election Day a national holiday? What are our possibilities here? There's a risk in that, but I think the risk ultimately will pay off.
All right, then. Yvette Dion, we surely appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, folks, I got to go to a break. We come back. We are going to be getting a live update on the execution of Marcellus Williams happening in Missouri. It should have started about 14 minutes ago. In 16 minutes, we'll be talking with Wesley Bell, St. Louis County DA, who was trying to stop this from happening. But that is not the case. The Supreme Court, in the last hour, chose not to intervene. As a result, Marcellus Williams being put to death as we speak in Missouri. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered right here on the Black Star Network.
He told us who he was.
Should abortion be punished? There has to be some form of punishment.
Then he showed us.
For 54 years, they were trying to get Roe v. Wade terminated, and I did it. And I'm proud to have done it.
Now Donald Trump wants to go further with plans to restrict birth control, ban abortion nationwide, even monitor women's pregnancies. We know who Donald Trump is. He'll take control. We'll pay the price.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Bob and I both voted for Donald Trump.
I voted for him twice. I won't vote for him again. January 6th was a wake-up call for me.
Donald Trump divides people. We've already seen what he has to bring.
He didn't do anything to help us. Kamala Harris, she cares about the American people. I think she's got the wherewithal to make a difference. I've never voted for a Democrat.
Yes, we're both lifelong Republicans.
The choice is very simple.
I'm voting for Kamala.
I am voting for Kamala Harris.
In 2016, Donald Trump said he would choose only the best people to work in his White House. Now those people have a warning for America. Trump is not fit to be president again. Here's his vice president.
Anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. It should come as no surprise that I will not be endorsing Donald Trump this year.
His defense secretary.
Do you think Trump can be trusted with the nation's secrets ever again?
No. I mean, it's just irresponsible action that places our service members at risk, places our nation's security at risk.
His national security advisor.
Donald Trump will cause a lot of damage. The only thing he cares about is Donald Trump.
And the nation's highest-ranking military officer.
We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator. And we don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator.
Take it from the people who knew him best. Donald Trump is a danger to our troops and our democracy. We can't let him lead our country again.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
IVF is a miracle for us because it allowed us to have our family. After having my daughter, I wanted more children, but my embryo transfer was canceled 8 days before the procedure. Donald Trump overturning Roe v. Wade stopped us from growing the family that we wanted. I don't want politicians telling me how or when I can have a baby. We need a president that will protect our rights, and that's Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Here's a 78-year-old billionaire who has not stopped whining about his problems.
Oh, she had a big crowd. Oh, the crowd.
This weird obsession with crowd sizes. It just goes on and on and on. America's ready for a new chapter. We are ready for a President Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
The overturning of Roe almost killed me. I had a blood clot in my uterus that caused my labor to have to be induced because of the overturn of Roe v. Wade. I wasn't able to get life-saving treatment sooner. I almost died. And that's because of the decision that Donald Trump made.
I was able to get Roe v. Wade terminated, and I'm proud to have done it.
The doctors and nurses were afraid that if they treated me in the incorrect way, that they would be prosecuted for that. and that's appalling. Donald Trump says that women should be punished.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion? There has to be some form of punishment. For the woman? Yeah.
I believe that women should have reproductive freedom to make the choices about their own bodies. 4 more years of Donald Trump means that women's rights will continue to be taken away one by one by one by one. This has to stop because women are dying.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Me, Sherry Shepard, with Sammy Roman.
I'm Dr. Robin B., pharmacist and fitness coach, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
All right, folks, President Joe Biden delivered his final comments on the world stage when he addressed the United Nations General Assembly today. Of course, this was a gathering there and where all the world leaders come together on an annual basis to speak to issues. And so here are some of the president's comments.
My back. My fellow leaders, today is the 4th time I've had the great honor of speaking to this assembly as President of the United States. It'll be my last. I've seen a remarkable sweep of history. I was first elected to office in the United States of America as a U.S. Senator in 1972. Now, I know I look like I'm only 40. I know that. I was 29 years old. Back then, we were living through an inflection point, a moment of tension and uncertainty. The world was divided by the Cold War. The Middle East was headed toward war. America was at war in Vietnam. At that point, the longest war in America's history. Our country was divided and angry, and there were questions about our staying power and our future. But even then, I entered public life not out of despair, but out of optimism. The United States and the world got through that moment. It wasn't easy or simple, without significant setbacks. But we go on to reduce the threat of nuclear weapons through arms control, and then go on to bring the Cold War itself to an end. Israel and Egypt went to war, but then forged a historic peace. We ended the war in Vietnam. The last year in Hanoi, I met with the Vietnamese leadership. We elevated our partnership to the highest level. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the capacity for reconciliation. That today, the United States and Vietnam are partners and friends. And it's proof that even from the horrors of war, there's a way forward. Things can get better. We should never forget that. I've seen that throughout my career. In the 1980s, I spoke out against apartheid in South Africa. And then I watched the racist regime fall. In the 1990s, I worked to hold Milosevic accountable for war crimes. He was held accountable. At home, I wrote and passed the Violence Against Women Act to end the scourge of violence against women and girls, not only in America, but across the world, as many of you have as well. But we have so much more to do, especially against rape and sexual violence as weapons of war and terror. We were attacked on 9/11 by al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. We brought him justice. Then I came to the presidency at another moment of crisis and uncertainty. I believed America had to look forward. New challenges, new threats, new opportunities were in front of us. We needed to put ourselves in a position to see the threats, to deal with the challenges, and to seize the opportunities as well. We need to end the era of war that began on 9/11. As Vice President to President Obama, he asked me to work to wind down the military operations in Iraq, and we did, painful as it was. When I came to office as president, Afghanistan had replaced Vietnam as America's longest war. I was determined to end it, and I did. It was a hard decision, but the right decision. 4 American presidents had faced that decision, but I was determined not to leave it to the 5th. It was a decision accompanied by tragedy. 13 brave Americans lost their lives, along with hundreds of Afghans in a suicide bomb. I think those lost lives, I think of them every day. I think of all the 2,461 U.S. military deaths over a long 20 years of that war. 20,744 American servicemen wounded in action. I think of their service, their sacrifice, and their heroism. I know other countries lost their own men and women fighting alongside us. We honor their sacrifices as well. To face the future,
folks, again, you can go to whitehouse.gov and you can actually see the full speech of President Joe Biden today at the 79th United Nations Assembly. Folks, it is official. Marcellus Williams has been executed by the state of Missouri for a stabbing death that took place where someone was stabbed, a reporter was stabbed 43 times. There were questions about the case. There were questions about his innocence, and numerous people made phone calls trying to pressure the governor to Missouri Supreme Court to stop this, but they chose not to do so. This right here was a decision by the United States Supreme Court where the cert was denied. The application for stay of execution of sentence of death presented to Justice Kavanaugh and by him referred to the court is denied. The petition for a writ of certiorari is denied. Justice Sotomayor, Justice Kagan, and Justice Jackson would grant the application for stay of execution of sentence of death. And so that took place again nearly 2 hours ago. This right here was the final statement, the last statement of Marcellus Williams. All praise be to Allah in every situation. As you see, it was signed there as well. His last meal took place at 10:53 this morning, consisting of chicken wings and tater tots. His last visitor was an imam. As I said, there were numerous people who questioned this case, and one of them was St. Louis County District Attorney Wesley Bell, who joins us right now. Glad to have you. Well, glad to have you back on the show, but unfortunately, in these circumstances, what happened here? What caused you to say when you became the DA that there was something wrong with this case and a wrong was being committed?
First and foremost, when I became the St. Louis County prosecuting attorney, I took an oath to bring justice, not just to bring convictions, not just to make my numbers look good, but to actually bring justice. And when we looked at this case, and we have a great team in our conviction incident review unit, also working with the Lathrop GPM, Matt Jacober, and so many people who invested time and resources into saving Marcellus's life because it was in the interest of justice. There was a case. This case had serious questions with respect to the integrity of the conviction, questions of potential innocence, and there was never a decision to be made between execution and just setting him free. The question was simply not to kill him because of the questions that were lingering about this case, because of questions about the integrity of the conviction. And so looking at this case, and again, this case was originally brought before my time, but I'm here now. And so it was our obligation to do everything that we could do to make certain that justice was served. And unfortunately, it was not.
Did you believe that he was innocent, or did you believe that there were problems with this, so therefore, unless you are absolutely sure about putting someone to death, that you don't do it unless you're sure?
Yeah, and so here's the thing. We had questions about his potential innocence, and we wanted the opportunity to investigate that, to determine whether he was actually innocent. But the case was set for execution so quickly, we didn't have time to do a full investigation. So we had to go with what we had and the strongest arguments that we can make. And so we did that, working with not only our folks in our office, folks from Lathrop, GPM, who I mentioned earlier, working around the clock to address the injustices that we saw because of the questionable convictions. And to your point, if there is a shadow of a doubt with respect to a conviction, the last option on the table should be execution. Now, I don't believe in the death penalty, but for those who believe in the death penalty, I don't think anyone would dispute that if there are questions about the conviction, and as the DA, not at the time of the conviction, but my office, I represent this office now, and we are telling you that there are serious questions and serious concerns about this conviction. That alone should be enough to warrant not killing someone.
You talk about these serious issues, yet the Missouri State Supreme Court, the governor, Supreme Court, just completely ignored those, and they said, no, kill him.
This is a failure of the system. There were several points where this could have been averted, and Marcellus Williams should still be alive. But those things did not happen. This case should never have there should have never been a conviction in the first place. If when my team looked at this case, this is a case that we would have had serious questions on the front end 20-something years ago, or what have you. And through the appellate process, there was a deal on the table that where his legal counsel, our office, and the court had agreed on taking him off death row and giving him life in prison without the possibility of parole. The family of the victim supported that outcome. But the Attorney General appealed, and it was overturned, as you mentioned. And again, I think there was a systemic breakdown, a systemic failure. And when we talk about criminal justice reform, and when we talk about why the death penalty is not morally appropriate, but also it does not serve as a deterrent, we get it wrong close to 8 to 9% of the time, I think numbers suggest. And it doesn't give families the closure, because the family of this victim, and let's not forget that they're still out there, and they're still there, and they have to relive this over and over again. And as the DA, I can't look them in the eye and tell them that the individual who did this horrendous crime is the person that was punished, because we didn't get an opportunity to do so. And that's a travesty of justice as well.
And folks who don't understand, this is a state crime, so there could be no federal part in here because it wasn't a federal case. It was all left up to the state. Questions from the panel. Derek, you're first.
Yeah, I appreciate the work that you tried to give Marcellus Williams. My question is, what's the next Marcellus Williams that your office is looking at? Because as you stated, the merits of this case are have so many questions, so many concerns. Who's the next Marcellus Williams that we can try to save?
You know, I think that we have to take a really long look in the mirror as a society, the last westernized country to still implement and utilize the death penalty. When I came into office on day one, I announced that under my administration, we would never ask for the death penalty, and we've stood by that. There are cases that are still coming, obviously, from before my time as prosecutor and around the country as well. But what happens is that we find these cases determined based on partisan standing. And in this case, we look at the U.S. Supreme Court's decision, which fell on partisan lines. The Democrats rightfully dissented in this case, Justice Sotomayor, Jackson, and there was one more Supreme Court justice who dissented. And simply, and I just want to be clear, and I think it's important for people to understand this. What we were asking is, because there is a question with respect to the integrity of the conviction, you cannot execute someone under those circumstances. This was not a question between punishment or letting him go free. At least if you don't execute him, he has a fair opportunity to vet out his claims of innocence, and we get to find out, and the family would get to find out ultimately what actually happened and who should be held accountable. And as the person in my county who gets to make the decisions on charges, change charges, dismiss charges, it is a sobering. This was a sobering situation when I had no control, and as the representative who runs the office, you would think that more deference would have been given to the actual office, saying there are questions about this conviction.
Larry?
Yeah, so thanks for appearing this evening in a solemn evening. And I'm wondering, from a legislative standpoint in the state of Missouri, what do you think that some of the things that state legislators could do, mechanisms in place to avoid, we talked earlier in the show about disproportionate rate in which Black people find themselves on death row and those exonerated. What steps do you think the state should take to avoid what we believe happened tonight happening in the future?
Well, first, we can end the death penalty. I think it's the easiest thing to do. It does not serve as a deterrent. It is wrong close to 10% of the time. It costs millions of more dollars to execute someone than to just sentence them to life in prison without the possibility of parole, because death penalty cases get the strictest scrutiny. It's called strict scrutiny, actually, that courts give it. And so so all of these appeals come in because you're doing something that you cannot undo, as opposed to life in prison, which can be undone by releasing individuals when they're found to be innocent or what have you. And here in Missouri, there was legislation that created a panel to review these cases. But before that panel could give any kind of finding, the panel was ended. So we never got an opportunity to find out what that panel would have recommended, what that panel knew or didn't know. We never got to see that because it was because the panel was ended before they were able to make any kind of findings, and simply letting them do their job potentially could have gotten us in a different place. But short of ending the death penalty, we're going to continue to have these types of situations, and it's and it's a tragedy.
Mustafa.
I mean, this is another sad day in America. Another black life has been sacrificed to the system, to the beast. I'm curious, what do you say to the 1.5 million folks who signed, the petition to help save this brother's life, and all those who are out there right now in this moment looking for a little glimmer of hope, a little glimmer of light? What are your words to them?
It's interesting, and I saw, comments on social media, and a lot of it was in the right place. Their hearts were in the right place, trying to save Marcellus Williams' life. But some of the comments I saw were, well, we got to vote the governor out. We got to make sure the governor knows that if he does this, he's going to get voted out. Well, guess what? It's a little late in the game. The governor is termed out. The governor's not running for a re-election. The governor can't run again. And so there's nothing that can be done politically to the governor. And so we got to make certain that we are staying involved in the process at all times, in every election. We can't just wait until we get upset. We can't wait until a situation like this happens to get involved. We got to stay involved. Even if Marcellus would have been spared the death penalty, as he should have, as was mentioned before, there are other cases out there across the country, and it's important that our voices are heard with respect to these criminal justice reforms that Roland knows that myself and even him have been championing for years. We got to be savvy about the fight. We got to be savvy about how we navigate and making certain that we show up at every single election. And this has to be one of the issues that we show up for. And candidates have to know that if we're going to support them, that we want this to be front and center. And so there's a lot more work to be done and a lot more lives to be saved.
DA Wesley Bell, we appreciate it. Thank you so very much. And the fight does indeed continue. And a reminder to people, there's a big U.S. Senate race in Missouri this year. And so if those folks in Missouri who are upset with this decision, guess what? You can take Josh Hawley out as a United States Senator and put in a voice of reason. So that's one way people can also respond. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Folks, when we come back, we're going to talk about Democrat politics, black vendors, black-owned media, lack of dollars, but also what needs to happen when it comes to putting resources on the ground to turn out young voters, black voters, and other voters of color. We're going to break all of that down next right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Support the work that we do. Send your check and money order to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C., 2003 7-0196. PayPal, R. Martin Unfiltered. Venmo's RM Unfiltered. Zelle, Roland at RolandSMartin.com, Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. We'll be right back.
He told us who he was.
Should abortion be punished?
There has to be some form of punishment.
Then he showed us.
For 54 years, they were trying to get Roe v. Wade terminated, and I did it, and I'm proud to have done it.
Now Donald Trump wants to go further with plans to restrict birth control, ban abortion nationwide, even monitor women's pregnancies. We know who Donald Trump is. He'll take control. We'll pay the price.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Bob and I both voted for Donald Trump.
I voted for him twice. I won't vote for him again. January 6th was a wake-up call for me.
Donald Trump divides people. We've already seen what he has to bring.
He didn't do anything to help us. Kamala Harris, she cares about the American people. I think she's got the wherewithal to make a difference. I've never voted for a Democrat.
Yes, we're both lifelong Republicans.
The choice is very simple.
I'm voting for Kamala.
I am voting for Kamala Harris.
In In 2016, Donald Trump said he would choose only the best people to work in his White House. Now those people have a warning for America. Trump is not fit to be president again. Here's his vice president.
Anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. It should come as no surprise that I will not be endorsing Donald Trump this year.
His defense secretary.
Do you think Trump can be trusted with the nation's secrets ever again?
No. I mean, it's just irresponsible action that places our service members at risk, places our nation's security at risk.
His national security advisor.
Donald Trump will cause a lot of damage. The only thing he cares about is Donald Trump.
And the nation's highest-ranking military officer.
We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator. And we don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator.
Take it from the people who knew him best. Donald Trump is a danger to our troops and our democracy. We can't let him lead our country again.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
IVF is a miracle for us because it allowed us to have our family. After having my daughter, I wanted more children, but my embryo transfer was canceled 8 days before the procedure. Donald Trump overturning Roe v. Wade stopped us from growing the family that we wanted. I don't want politicians telling me how or when I can have a baby. We need a president that will protect our rights, and that's Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Here's a 78-year-old billionaire who has not stopped whining about his problems.
Oh, she had a big crowd. Oh, the crowd.
This weird obsession with crowd sizes. It just goes on and on and on. America's ready for a new chapter. We are ready for a President Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
The overturning of Roe almost killed me. I had a blood clot in my uterus that caused my labor to have to be induced because of the overturn of Roe v. Wade. I wasn't able to get life-saving treatment sooner. I almost died. And that's because of the decision that Donald Trump made.
I was able to get Roe v. Wade terminated, and I'm proud to have done it.
The doctors and nurses were afraid that if they treated me in the incorrect way, that they would be prosecuted for that. And that's appalling. Donald Trump says that women should be punished.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion?
There has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah.
I believe that women should have reproductive freedom to make the choices about their own bodies. 4 more years of Donald Trump means that women's rights will continue to be taken away one by one by one by one. This has to stop because women are dying.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
I am Tommy Davidson. I play Oscar on Proud Family, Louder and Prouder.
Right now, I'm rolling with Roland Martin, unfiltered, uncut, unplugged, and undamn believable. You hear me?
Been frozen out.
Facing an extinction level event.
We don't fight this fight right now. You're not going to have black owners. So many times in this show, I've talked about this idea that for African Americans politically, we're sharecroppers. In that, in terms of who gets the resources of these campaigns, unfortunately, you largely have white organizations, white companies that are getting the contracts when it comes to media, when it comes to direct mail, when it comes to political consultants, we're frozen out. Well, folks at Notice dropped a story the other day, and they were talking about they interviewed a lot of people dealing with the campaign of Vice President Kamala Harris. This was their headline: Black operatives are furious over how Kamala Harris' campaign is spending money. Minority-owned firms are frustrated. The campaign is relying on white-owned firms for spending, and they're worried that could ultimately hurt the campaign with voters of color. So they go through the story. There are a number of people who are quoted in here. Derek Johnson, the NAACP, and others talking about problems in terms of where the whole issue lies. And this is not a new issue. This is not an issue that all of a sudden just cropped up. This has been the problem for any number of years. And again, it's always a battle of over the money. And what you have is, let's be real clear, African-American women are the #1 voters for Democrats in this country. Black men are #2. But when it comes to the money, white consultants control the money. That has been the issue over and over and over again. And they determine how much money is being spent on black get out the vote efforts, how much money is being spent on black-owned media. These things happen on a very consistent basis. Now, let's talk about how much money. Now, this is the issue. This story, though, focused on the Harris-Walz campaign. But we got to remember, that's not where all the money is. There are millions of dollars that have been raised out there by other people. So here's the first graphic. So I sent an email a week ago to these 4 entities, specifically asking for information regarding their black-owned media plan. That is the Democratic Senate Congressional Committee, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, Future Forward USA Action, PAC, and American Bridge 21st Century PAC. 4 of those, significant amounts of money. Now, we're going to show you right now, again, how much money these various PACs have on hand as we speak. Go ahead and pull it up. So watch this, folks. House Majority PAC, $80 million. The DCCC, $92 million. The Senate Majority PAC, $90 million. The Democracy PAC, $40 million. SEIU PAC, $50 million. American Bridge 21st Century PAC, $32 million. Fair Shake PAC, $90 million. And so that's that one. And so let me also, because I was sent, Future Forward, let me give y'all that one because I saw that one as well. So you know how much money they have on hand. So let's see here. Let me find it. So Future Forward, let's see here, $36.8 million. They've spent $77 million, okay? So in a week, none of them responded. I sent an email last Tuesday. I sent an email on Thursday. I sent an email on today. I text individuals the DCCC was supposed to be preparing a report to send to me. I was supposed to get that Monday, didn't come to me on Monday. But I'm showing you that, so pull the numbers back up. I'm showing you that because if you just put the focus on just the campaign, we're talking right here, look at this right here. Add it up, the first 270 million, then you add up, now you're at 260, now you're at 300, 350, now you at 380, now you at 470. You throw in America Forward, that's 500 million. So the reality is these PACs have more money on hand right now than the campaign of Vice President Kamala Harris. Now these PACs, their job is to support the efforts of the vice presidents. So why aren't they also being asked the question, where's your black-owned media spend? How much are you spending when it comes to these campaigns? And again, I sent the email, and the email was addressed to the DCCC, the DSCC, Future Forward, and 21st Century. No response at all. That's unacceptable. Now, the New York Times had a story out today. The New York Times had a story out. Let me see, let me pull it up. And the story talked about the need for more money to be spent in these battleground states on black voters and young voters, because they show how well Vice President Kamala Harris has been doing in getting these folks registered, but they're saying that, hey, it's still a problem. So here you go with the headline here. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Okay. All right, folks, we got to sit here. Some little issues right here. But what we are seeing, again, are the sort of decisions being made as to, well, how much money should be spent that black folks are always talking about. And again, what these consultants do, they constantly are trying to chase this white Republican suburban vote and throw money at that as opposed to targeting the resources of folks who are likely going to turn out. Now go to my iPad. So this is the headline. More money urgently needed to reach younger and minority voters, organizers warn Harris donors. And so this memo was put out by Democratic Super PAC Priorities USA and the progressive advocacy organization Progress Now. The New York Times obtained this. And they say Vice President Kamala Harris' candidacy has reinvigorated the Democratic base. She has not yet completely consolidated the support of the voters of color who receive much of their information online and will decide close elections. It points to Progress Now data that suggests Ms. Harris is trailing President Biden's levels of support with Black, Latino, and young voters in Arizona, Michigan, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin in 2020, and notes that the diverse coalition Mr. Biden assembled were critical to his slim margins of victory. Quote, "We cannot tolerate any loss of support and hope to win. Without an immediate investment in communication to these groups that is commensurate with their power in the electorate, electing Harris in November will become harder." Now, I've been saying that, y'all, for more than 3 years. I've really been saying that for the last year. See, the problem is here, and I understand it. Folks will look just to the campaign, but you must examine the entire ecosystem. We're talking about money being spent. You've got your reproductive rights groups. You've got Emily's List. You've got environmental groups. You've got labor. You've got all these different groups that are spending money. This entire election is estimated somewhere from $10 to $12 billion is going to be spent. Yet when you start asking the question, how much is being spent on black folks? Crickets. And folks get real quiet. How much money is being spent on black-owned media? Very small amounts of money. And so here we are, 43 days, or was it 42? And folks like me and others, including my next guest, have been saying for months, don't wait, don't wait, don't wait too late. Now, the game shifted in July when President Biden announced he wasn't running for re-election. Vice President Kamala Harris reinvigorates the ticket, but she had a very short runway. So she couldn't put together her own team. She frankly had to inherit the team of President Biden. And I dare say, she probably wouldn't necessarily have those same people. But it is what it is. So I would say to, again, PAC Priorities USA, well, here's what I want to know. What are y'all spending to reach these voters? Where's the money going? Who's being hired on the ground? Those are the questions that folk should be asking. And I'm not trying to put the campaign off the hook, but what I'm saying is the entire Democratic apparatus must deal with this, because this is something that comes up every 4 years, and it's stupid. And again, I'm going to say it, the same white boys and white girls, they are the ones who make all the money. They're the ones who lock down all the checks, and they're the ones who are making those decisions. And what ends up happening is black folks are, knocking on the doors, trying to yell, hey, what's going on? And so this continues to be the problem. And I dare say, I believe that Vice President Kamala Harris wins. I believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is going to be far more interested in changing this dynamic and not trying to have this fight every 4 years because it's stupid. Because you cannot have a changing of the country with demographics becoming more minority, and you have white folks running the system. Let me tell y'all something. A couple of years ago, not a couple of years ago, probably it was either 16 or 17. Folks at TV One invited me to a media buyers meeting reception here in D.C. Y'all walked in there. It was about 300-400 people. It was no more than 5 black people. Let me say it again. It's about 300 or 400 people at that reception. No more than 5 black people. Now it's 1 to 5. If you want to understand who controls the money in politics, it ain't black people. Now, you got big, rich white donors giving money, but we ain't controlling those dollars. Now, they need our votes, but then we're having to beg, borrow, and plead for the money. That's why I call it political sharecropping. Joining me right now is Christopher Toller. We've had him on the show numerous times. He's been doing lots of tweeting about polling data that he has been seeing all across the country. He's director of the Black Voter Project, co-founder of Black Insights Research, joining me from Sacramento. And Chris, you have been making this point constantly in your tweets that if the Harris-Walz campaign wants to win, and if Democrats want to win governor's mansion in North Carolina, hold the Senate seat in Ohio, hold the Senate seat in Arizona, hold the Senate seat in Nevada, flip the Senate seat in Florida and Texas, there has to be investment targeting black people, minority voters, and young voters.
Yeah, Roland, thanks for having me back. I think this is such an important point to drive home. And it's really twofold for me. One, this election cycle is going to go one of two ways, depending on how much investment is made in turning out black voters. I really don't have much worry that black voters are going to vote for Harris at a margin similar to 2020. We're seeing that in good polling data that captures accurate black samples. But I am, still worried that turnout is going to reach numbers that are needed, the 62, 63% nationwide, higher in battleground states like Pennsylvania in 2020, black turnout was upwards of 70%. And those numbers are not just going to come out of nowhere, right? It takes work, it takes investment, it takes campaign spending, mobilization, running ads in those communities, and running ads that are being put together by people who know what it takes to mobilize black voters. And so, as you said, like you are one of 5 people in a room of 400 of black media personnel trying to get money and things. In the black consulting world, there's only a handful of black consulting firms trying to figure out how to get, a contract here or a contract there with these big campaigns, with these PACs to actually help them mobilize black voters. And really, it's kind of a side story, right? There's not the interest that there should be. Secondly, because turning out black voters, mobilizing black voters is the way to build the coalition for the future. Black voters, as you mentioned, are the most steady support of the Democratic Party. And once you get someone to vote, they're likely to continue voting for the foreseeable future. And so the more black people you can get into the electorate, the more young people you can get registered and voting in an election like this, when there's a lot of excitement, a lot of enthusiasm around a candidate like Kamala Harris, you could change the electorate for years to come, right? For generations, right, if you put that time and energy in.
And Chris, Chris, the issue here is not percentage. It's volume. That's the point. Yeah. What I have been saying on this show to our audience is that if black people turn out at 70% of our capacity, it completely changes the election. So, because first of all, we've seen in the last 5 cycles, the black voter turnout has been dropping. We also understand voter suppression, shutting down of locations, and all the different methods Republicans are doing to stop people targeting formerly incarcerated folks in Nebraska and Florida and other places. But it's turning them out. And when you talk about those ads, yes, ads that resonate with black people, ads done by black people speaking in our language. But it's not just ads. It's also on the ground. It's touching people. It's activation. It's also funding grassroots organizations who are going door to door, precinct by precinct, who are going to those places, sending folks that look like them. You can't send some young white kids with an iPad to rural North Carolina and rural Georgia. They don't connect with those folks. You've got to be able to you got to be doing things in East North Carolina. You got to be doing things in rural Georgia. Like I was there with Warnock in 2020 and 2022. Those are the things that were happening. And unfortunately, that requires resources. But what happens with these white Democratic strategists, Chris, they want to dump all the money in television because that's how they make their money, because they get a percentage of the media buys. And so you got to have folk understand. And this is also what I've been saying constantly, and I've been yelling this that the black electorate has changed. If you look at, every year post the civil rights movement, and I call myself a civil rights movement baby because I was born November 14th, 1968, and I see with my generation, which was Gen X, that you see every year less self-identify as Democrats, which means we are open to other perspectives. Now, do we still likely vote Dem? Yes, but we don't self-identify, which means you now have to micro-target black people. That means that you now have to spend, the reality is, 3 to 4 times more money to reach black voters than you used to do because black voters are not self-identifying. And Chris, I dare say that's the problem for the white consultants. They don't want to spend that money. They are looking at going, well, you know, why should we spend, according to the Notice story, $70 million was spent on paid media for black audiences in 2020, and it's going to be less spent by the campaign this year. And again, that was an issue with turnover there between Biden and Harris. That whole month, campaign was almost broke because fundraising pretty much shut down. That was a big problem as well. I can tell you for a fact that there was a meeting with labor in June, on June 17th, and $60 million was committed to be spent. And then, of course, that debate was 10 days later. But these white Democratic strategists are going to have to shut the hell up and listen to black people and realize the micro-targeting of black people is real, and you're going to have to cut a bigger check, and that means funding black political consultants, black pollsters, black get-out-the-vote efforts, and black-owned media.
And I've been in some of those conversations, and what you're saying is exactly what's happening. And a lot of the research falls to the same faults as the larger sort of public opinion polling research we've seen, where they look at the black community in certain states or across the country, and they say, oh, it's 12% here, it's 13% here. In some states, it's less. And it's more effective to spend trying to address all voters, and we'll just throw in a little part of the ad or throw in a little part of the campaign that's going to capture black voters, speaking to them through just a little segment of the entire campaign instead of doing more targeted, focused ads. And that's not working, right? And the black community ends up getting written off, ends up being forgotten in these larger campaigns. And there's a real missed opportunity, especially at a moment like this, to not only bring the black community into this campaign, but again, to mobilize the black community for the future. When we look at places like Georgia, Georgia didn't turn blue overnight. It was almost a decade of a campaign on the ground there, Black Voters Matter campaign, working to try and get Stacey Abrams in the governor's office, as you mentioned, to get Warnock elected to the Senate. That was years and years and years in the making, that these campaigns, that these PACs don't really want to do or don't understand how to do and aren't committed to that type of investment. But that's really what's needed. And if so, we won't have to look at decisions like today where we see conservative courts deciding whether or not someone gets extra time to live, right? Or if there's actually going to be a stay on an execution where there's sort of overwhelming evidence that someone should have extra time to live. In this case, right, the court, because it's overwhelming conservative right now, made that decision for him. If black voters are in the fold, if we are having black voters voices heard to the magnitude that they should be and could be, it can completely change the political landscape.
I want to go to my panel here. I'm going to go to Mustafa first. Mustafa.
You're doing. My dad used to have this quote. He used to say, "Don't tell me you love me, show me you love me." And it makes sense that don't tell me you want black votes, show me you want black votes. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, how do we make sure that these folks who have these dollars are actually moving them? What is the pressure point? What are the leverages that we have to move this in the right direction?
That's a great question. And I think for me, I always turn to just like getting out the vote firsthand. And once you can get someone voting and active, and you can make the case that their vote matters, that there's something to vote for, then you have to look at getting black elected representatives in office and getting black officials in office who are from the community, who will relate to the community, and who understand the struggle that we're talking about. And so it's not only just changing who's voting, but changing what the elected representatives look like. And as you'll see, some of the most vocal representatives out there fighting for the Black community day in, day out are Black representatives, right? Even if they don't have that deciding vote, even if they're not out there passing the most revolutionary policy, their voice is out there, oftentimes changing the conversation. And so it's a two-way street for me. You have to get the voters in there and active, but then you also have to get Black representatives on the ticket and voted it into office as well. And that automatically almost puts pressure on the parties, on these PACs, to think about the Black community in different ways.
Larry?
Yeah, hey, Chris. Thanks for taking time. I follow you on Twitter and listen, have a chance to read a lot of your tweets about the Black vote, and as some of these polls come out the last several weeks. So thank you for all your work. And so my question relates to something, Roland talked about in terms of micro-targeting. A lot of times people think Black people are homogeneous and we all think the same way, which is not accurate. And so I saw some of your tweets you talked about, and we've seen some stats about this in terms of Black males under the age of 40. And, that number, a larger percentage of those individuals will consider voting for Donald Trump. And so hypothetically speaking, if you were running the Harris campaign, hopefully someone from the campaign is watching right now, what would you do to micro-target those young Black males under the age of 40 to convince them it's in their best issues, in terms of policy issues, and this is in their best interest to support VP Harris?
That's a great question. And this goes back to, again, sort of understanding the heterogeneity of the Black community, and that it's not all just one homogenous group, even within this idea of young Black men. And of course, you're going to have this small percentage of the Black community that is conservative, that is going to be sort of Republican and vote for Trump no matter what. But anyone else, right, what we found, and we've done a good amount of research on this at Black Insights Research, suggesting that the one thing that does move people to vote who wouldn't otherwise vote, especially young Black men, is identifying threat and really focusing in on the dangers to the Black community in this moment of time, Trump being one of those most obvious dangers, but also talking about Project 2025, talking about the stripping of voting rights, talking about over-policing and police violence, right? Bringing those things to the forefront, and how one party, this case MAGA and the GOP, is really working to enhance those threats to the Black community, where the other party is in a way trying to stall those out, at least block those from taking hold or becoming worse. That actually activates Black men more so than other things, and in some ways closes the gender gap, at least when it comes to participation and getting engaged in the system and kind of getting over some sense of apathy that a lot of Black men might feel when looking at politics and seeing all of these messages being thrown at them from all different sides of the aisle.
Derek?
Chris, I appreciate your work. My question is around ROI, the return on investment, right? I mean, do you have an instrument to where you can gauge what that mobilization and that organization looks like? Here in Georgia, as you've already stated, and Roland also mentioned, out of 159 counties, 122 counties are in the rural parts of Georgia, and nearly 1 million Black voters, registered voters, do not come out and vote every cycle. And we're just trying to figure out what we need to do, where we need to invest, and how we need to penetrate this area where we can get and mobilize those 1 million Black voters that typically do not come out in Georgia. What's that ROI? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I wouldn't be able to put a number on it off the top of my head. But in a place like Georgia, right, getting to those rural voters is going to be really expensive. It's going to be really hard work. It's probably not going to have the greatest return on investment in the short run, in the immediary. But long term, right, it's going to bring people into the fold that otherwise wouldn't vote.
Actually, hold up, Chris. The reason I disagree with you, again, I'm going to use 2020 and 2022 as a perfect example. There was the amount of attention and activation that was happening in Albany, Jonesboro, Statesboro, Savannah, Athens. There were concerts. You had surrogates going to those places. I'll be honest, and I've been asking a question, the Harris-Walz campaign, she's been doing rallies, he's been doing rallies, but where are the other people? Where are the other events? My deal is, how are you not flooding the zone? I remember just the number of black entertainers and other folks who were out there on the campaign trail who were doing things. Now, maybe you're going to have this massive blitz, in October. I personally thought that should have been right after the convention, going hard in September, going hard in October, and not waiting because when early voting was starting. Because what I kept saying to people, the voting is the end. But before I got to get you voted, I got to get you registered. Before I got to get you registered, I gotta actually inform, enlighten, and explain to you. And I literally said that enlightenment piece, that explanation piece, they should have been doing that from January to July, because the data from Terrence Woodbury, from Cornell Belcher shows people were saying, I don't know what they've done, I don't know what they've accomplished, and so they need to be spending the time explaining policy, holding these town hall discussions. They should have been flooding the zone for me, and this is pre-Harris. This was really when the Biden folks were running the campaign. I was like, what are y'all doing? They should have been having black mayors, and they should have been having state reps and state senators and county commissioners having these conversations all over the country, especially in these battleground states. It wasn't happening. Now your runway is shorter. Now it's shorter. And the reason I call those PACs out, pull it back up. The reason I call the PACs out, because the campaign, let me be clear, the campaign has a massive infrastructure. They're opening offices. These PACs right here, they're sitting on money. They're spending that money on ads. And so they should be not just spending that money on ads. Their money, Chris, should be going on the ground. There should be events happening all across North Carolina, East North Carolina. They should be happening in Michigan, happening in Pennsylvania, should be happening in Georgia. And yes, the campaign has opened a second office in Jacksonville, having some stuff in Florida, but that's where they should be. And I'm sitting there going like, okay, where's flooding the zone? When is that going to happen? Because there has to be a sense of urgency to move now.
No, absolutely. Let me be clear. When I say the return of investment might not be what they want, it's simply because they're looking at how much money they would have to spend to move into these areas, to put offices in these rural areas. And for them, it doesn't calculate as to something worth it. One, because it's never been done before in some of these places.
Right.
It was just mentioned in parts of rural Georgia. So they have no idea what they could actually do.
But I don't think we need offices.
When they're making this calculation,
I'll be honest.
When they're making this calculation, they don't know what to expect. So they're not even considering it in most cases.
And here's the deal. I don't think you need offices. But I think what you can do, you can stop by and visit. I think what you have to do is pull the map up and sit here and go, oh, and again, this is just how my brain sort of works. If I'm looking at the map, and I'm pulling up 2020 data, 2016 data, 2022 data, and I'm sitting there going, okay, how many eligible? First of all, which of these areas have sizable black populations, and what was the turnout in these areas? You have the data. You can see it by precinct. And so then my deal then is, okay, how do we now have events, and whether you roll in for a day, whether you do a bus tour, or whether you sit here and say, okay, fine, there's going to be campaign surrogates having events. We're also going to be funding. That's where the PACs come in. We're going to be funding Black Voters Matter, funding Georgia Stand Up, funding some of these other people to be driving those different things, and then having their local events. To me, that's what you do. And here's the other thing that these white consultants don't even understand. In rural Georgia, and Derek knows this, in North Carolina, it's a whole bunch of black preachers. And they own these small little gospel stations. And so, they're the heartbeat of the communities, and it's cheaper to go in right now and buy out all their inventory than it is the major cities. That, to me, has to be that sense of urgency. But the only way that happens, Chris, if those folks are willing to go, damn, we got to spend more money on black people. And that's always the problem. They've decided, these white strategists have decided, this is all we have to spend on black people. And the reason they don't want to spend more, because that becomes the new baseline.
And when they actually spend more, they get asked questions about what happened, about how turnout, about who changed the election, about the voting rates of different groups, and black folk will respond, as we've seen, right? When you put people in these communities, in campaigns, in the black community, black people respond. They get out to vote. They register to vote. We've seen registration rates amongst young black men and women skyrocket, right? Hundreds of % increase since 2020. And so that's exactly it, right? It's about, do they want to spend the money? And if they spend the money, what does that mean for campaigns going forward? It sets a new benchmark. And in places like Georgia, you don't even consider, a lot of these campaigns don't even really consider what it means to get over humps that have to do with voter suppression too. You mentioned preachers and souls to the polls, and understanding that it's even more important in places where you have limited early voting, when you can't necessarily vote on weekends, when there's not ballot drop boxes easily and conveniently located. It takes even more effort to get the black community out and voting in these places. And that's, again, something often left out of these inside conversations.
And Derek, here's the real deal. Derek, we're talking about margins. If you literally, Derek, do what we're talking about, and that nets you 2, 3, 4, 5,000 votes, Derek, what did Biden and Harris win Georgia by in 2020?
11,780. So we're talking about margins.
Right. If you do what we're talking about, and you all of a sudden pick up 2, 3, 4, 5,000, that's half of your margin of victory in 2020.
And you know, here's the thing, Roland, that you and Chris highlighting, which is the reason why I asked about the ROI. I don't know what it costs for your operations to run, but they're talking about a $30 million ad buy in the Atlanta metropolitan area. And I said, well, $30 million, that won't reach Columbus. That won't reach Albany. That won't reach Valdosta. And so if they gave someone like a Roland Martin a fourth of that $30 million, you not only will, because everybody knows you, right? So when you show up, that is the party. And so if they gave you a fourth of that $30 million, you will reach those areas that $30 million ad buy, because here's the secret. Not everybody watching television. Not everybody's reading the AJC, Roland. Not everybody watching ABC, NBC. They're streaming. And so those dollars, which is the reason why I asked Chris about the ROI, are not hitting the market, the base here in Georgia.
Well, also I think what you're doing, and look, Larry Mustafa knows this as well. The thing is this here. I was in Atlanta Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And guess what? When I was watching the game on Sunday, halftime came on. When the political ads came on, mute button. That's literally what happened. Because there were so many political ads, I hit the mute button. So what I'm talking about here, this is where money is being put on the ground. And Chris, that really is the rub with a lot of these, and I'm being very specific when I say white Democratic strategists. They believe, put it in television, put it in radio, do digital ads. I totally understand that. I fundamentally believe in those last 45 days, and actually you gotta be doing it, and I kept saying you gotta do this thing earlier, you gotta be on the ground talking to people. And yes, that's hard work, but you have to figure out the ways to communicate with people because, again, it's margins. It's gonna be margins in Georgia. Obama only won North Carolina by 14,100 votes. So if I'm studying the North Carolina map, I'm looking at what are my touches? Where are all of my touches in North Carolina? Am I only in Charlotte, in Raleigh, in Durham? Am I going to these other small places around the state? Okay, and then if it's Philadelphia, where am I going there? Where am I going in Michigan? That's just sort of how I look at it. And again, how you spend the money, and you gotta spend that money with black people who know black people. You can't keep spending the money. Like I'm sitting here looking at this story. I think I'm still, like right here. It says, one company, media buying and analytics, they got $36.5 million. Media buying got $76.4 million from the campaign. Another $62 million. Bully Pulpit got $41.4 million. They got another $17.5 million. And then there's a company here, they say called Converging Media. They said Convergent Media got a lot of money with media buying, and it's supposed to be a black-owned company, and none of the black people with agencies ever heard of Converging Media. Like, they ain't never heard of them. And so when you start looking at these agencies, and I can tell you, I know for a fact, you got Fuse, Cliff Franklin, Carol H. Williams, Carol H. Williams Advertising, Liquid Soul, Terrell Whitley. You got black agencies that actually do this work, Chris, who also know who the black people are with influence and how to maximize the dollars.
Yeah, that's the key point. I mean, I think we've seen time and time again, social media, online can be really good for getting messages out there, but it's not going to get people out of their house. They might click the like button, but they're not going to go out and join the rally or join the protest. Very few people actually transfer that social media energy into their own lives. And research has shown time and time again that the best way to get underrepresented people out of their house, engaged in politics, interested in campaigns, is not just face-to-face contact, but actually having a conversation with them and having a conversation with someone from the campaign, from the political group that looks like them, that knows their neighborhood, that can speak to the issues the way that they understand them. These are the most important key factors to really getting people from underrepresented communities, and especially black folk, out and engaged in politics who otherwise wouldn't be. It really all comes down to the effort and the strategy that's put into it. And you have to look at research. You have to look at what works. You can't just go sort of by this fly-by-the-book approach.
And let me be real clear. You've been breaking the polling data down. What Vice President Harris and Walz has been doing is sort of like a boxer, where they are going, as they get closer to the fight, they're in peak shape. So they have been executing a very strong strategy. Now, though, this is now where it's a turnout game. It's a turnout game. It's not, that's all this now is. And you've got to then look at those numbers and say, where can we turn out 100, 200, 300, 400, 50, 75? And those numbers start adding up. Because again, Obama won North Carolina by 14,100 votes in 2008. And he only won North Carolina because of a massive black turnout. That's what the Harris-Walz campaign is going to need to win North Carolina and to win Georgia. It's doable, but you got to cut the check to actually make it happen.
Necessarily capture all the new voters for Harris. We have to assume that there's going to be a handful or a significant number of new voters on Trump's side as well. People coming out who don't want to see the first woman president. People who are voting through their eyes of racism and sexism. And you have to be ready for that. And so you can't just say, oh, we're going to get it. We got this margin. You have to be over the top, especially considering the attacks on the voting process and the voting system. Rumors of, problems certifying votes. You have to get every last voter out there in an election like this. You don't want it to be as close as as these super thin margins, because it's going to end up coming back and biting you in the butt when it's all said and done. And you don't want to lose on any of these technicalities when you can spend the money now and continue to actually drive up your numbers with black folk and other groups.
I'm going to leave one last story. That is 60 days out in 2016. The Hillary Clinton campaign was told, hey, you need to spend more money on black media. The request was $5 million. They said no. They were sitting on $65 million. They said no. Check this out. I never forget, Chris, Mustafa, Derek, Larry, no lie. On the Friday, on a Thursday night before the election, I get an email late at night. They were trying to rush out almost $1 million to black media, and it was too late. Inventory had already been bought. It was too late. And here's the other mistake. Campaign ends, the PACs and the campaign left with millions of dollars in the bank. Is it the point when you run to spend all your money, you put it in the field before Election Day? That, to me, should not be the mistake that they make. So we'll see what happens. Chris, I appreciate it, my brother. Thanks so very much. Let me thank Derek, Larry, Mustafa for being here as well. We'll see what happens. Folks, that is it for us. We appreciate y'all watching today's show. Don't forget to support the work that we do. Join our Bring the Funk fan club. You can see your check and money order to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. PayPal's R. Martin Unfiltered. Venmo's RM Unfiltered. Zelle. Roland at RolandSMartin.com. Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Download the Black Star Network app. Apple phone, Android phone, Apple TV, Android TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Xbox One, Samsung Smart TV. Don't forget to get a copy of my book, White Fear, How the Browning of America is Making White Folks Lose Their Minds. Available bookstores nationwide. Get the audio version on Audible. Folks, I'll see you tomorrow. Let me shout out North Carolina A&T. Yep, I'm rocking the North Carolina A&T vote shirt. And so shout out to them. Again, y'all going to be critical. And every student, North Carolina A&T should be registered. And y'all should be casting your ballot in this critical election. Folks, I'll see y'all tomorrow right here on the Black Star Network. Holla! Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?